Hello, everyone. Welcome. As folks are joining, I'm going to ask folks to drop in your name in the chat, your role, your organization, and where you're tuning in from. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and get started so we can make sure we have enough time for our awesome panel discussion with our amazing speakers here today, as well as some of the Q&A portion. So welcome, everyone. My name is Lima. I am with the Initiative for Energy Justice, joining you today from San Diego, the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people. And thank you all for being here today. I think it's going to be an amazing and powerful conversation, and we will talk about community-led solar solutions, as well as just access and ownership of those technologies. I can see that we have folks tuning in from all over, so thank you all for taking the time to being here today. Before I jump into the main content in our discussion, I would love to share the agenda of what we will do. So I will provide just a very quick overview. As you all know, IEJ has released Solar for All brief, so just quick framing around that. And then we'll have an opportunity for speaker intros, the panel discussion. We'll walk through the Q&A, so please enter your questions in the Q&A feature. As we go along, we'll have some time for the last 10-15 minutes to answer your questions. And then lastly, we will wrap up with a closing. Now, I know folks are here from all over, so we just ask that we are respectful of all voices and perspectives. As I mentioned, please submit your questions in the Q&A feature throughout the session. We'll get to them at the last 10 to 15 minutes of our call today. Stay engaged. Your insights matter. We'd love to hear from you all. Please use the chat feature to connect, to share any insights or anything that's sparking up for y'all. And lastly, this is a space where we share and grow together, so embrace learning here. With that, let's dive in. So today's conversation directly builds on IEJ Solar for All policy brief. We released the brief after tracking the program's implementation over the past 10 months. That included some interviews with the Solar for All grantees, and we also engaged with partners and coalitions supporting these efforts nationally. Our focus with the policy brief was definitely documenting both challenges and successes of the implementation and elevating the lessons learned. What worked, what didn't, so that we could hopefully replicate those in the future opportunities come for similar funding, and we continue to mobilize effectively. And y'all are going to see on the screen here a quick timeline of what's been going on with the program. So as of August of this year, we saw that the EPA announced termination notices as well as clawback of these funds, essentially halting the program. And just as of last week and this month, we are seeing multiple coalitions and folks filing lawsuits challenging this untimely termination of the program. So why does this matter? Clean energy is here to stay. As of March 2025, clean energy sources generated more than half of US electricity for the first time on record. And as renewables become the foundation for our energy future, we must ensure that both access and ownership of clean, renewable energy reaches the most impacted and vulnerable communities, not just the wealthy and those who can afford it. And this work stands on the shoulders of environmental justice leaders, Indigenous folks and communities that have been the original stewards of the land, frontline communities, and countless advocates who have fought for energy sovereignty and climate justice for generations. Today, we will focus on three things: community-led solutions in response to the policy shifts, the tools and resources that are working on the ground, and how we mobilize and build on lessons learned for future opportunities. Our goal is simple. We would like to elevate strategies that advance solar equity and ensure that energy justice remains at the center of the renewable energy transition. With that, I'd like to welcome our speakers, and we will go in alphabetical order. So yeah, starting with Allie, introduce yourself.
That sounds great. Thanks, Lima. Hi, I'm Allie Garrett. I am a program director at Clean Energy Fund of the Carolinas. We are a nonprofit green bank based in North and South, or serving North and South Carolina. We don't have a headquarters, so we're distributed across those two states. And like I said, we're a nonprofit green bank, so our goal is to fill gaps in the market. So Solar for All was really sort of core to our values and how we can move work forward, which is working with folks who may not have the credit score immediately, or may on paper not look like the most reliable person to lend to or something like that. But in actuality, these are folks who really pay their bills, who stay up to date, and have maybe just had other incidences that led to a bad credit score or something like that. So we tend to look more holistically at households to make lending more available. And with Solar for All, we had substantial grant funding that would have gone to the lowest income communities as well. So now I'm program director formally of Solar for All, but when Solar for All comes back, we'll be ready to jump right back in.
Thank you, Caleb.
I love the optimism, Allie, when Solar for All comes back. I'm Caleb Sealing. I am the Director of Tribal Grants and Programs here at the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy. We are also a non-headquartered nonprofit organization. We're everywhere. We are an Indigenous-led, philanthropy-funded nonprofit organization. Our founder, Sherry Smith, is from Mi'kmaq descent up in Maine, and she started this organization in its first iteration in 2016 as Covenant Energy, and about two and a half years ago, sort of refocused, rebranded into the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy. I joined the Alliance about 2 years ago. There were about 10 of us then. There's about 45 of us now. It's just grown like gangbusters, which really shows the need and the appetite for clean energy in Indian country. And I'll talk more about the Alliance in a little bit, but thanks for having me.
Last but not least, Heaven.
Hi, my name is Heaven Campbell. I'm the Senior Program Director in Florida for Solar United Neighbors. We're a national C3 nonprofit that represents solar owners and supporters. And we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And we were a named recipient on a few Solar for All grants, including part of the coalition that applied and got 156 million here in Florida. So I'll be kind of hyper focusing on the Florida one specifically, but Sun was involved in I think the official number is like 12 across the nation. So we just recently filed a suit last Monday. So I'll talk more about that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you all for the intros. I'm really excited for this conversation. So let's get into it. Just zooming out a little bit, starting with the big picture. I was curious to know what you all think and what did you guys see with federal investments in solar programs prove was possible that we hadn't seen before. And we can go in the reverse order, so maybe starting with you, Heaven, and then we'll go backwards. So again, what did federal investments in solar programs prove was possible that we hadn't seen before?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that one thing that it showed is that we can level the playing field, for one. I mean, there are a lot of subsidies across the energy sector. I think that's not always well known. And it was a historic investment in not just solar energy, but in energy justice and energy equity. So it was truly one of the nation's first responses outside of LIHEAP, um, which I'm probably going to butcher the acronym, but I believe stands for Low Income Heat and Energy Assistance Program. And outside of LIHEAP, which has now actually seen a huge reduction in funding, this was a historic investment in the working class of America, and trying to sustainably for a very long period of time address energy burden. And I want to like highlight sustainably and long term because programs like LIHEAP are really acute. They're kind of just like this um, critical remedy at a moment in time and can't be used long term. The same with how I think about this in my mind is the different types of incentives that we've seen, like the COVID incentives that we received, or before that, during the Great Recession, some of the stimulus payments. So those were kind of this momentary boost to the economy, relief for families that would then feed into like a circular economy idea. And Solar for All was really unique because it would have provided, or will, if I gather some of Allie's optimism, will provide a long-term sustainable solution to energy burden that allow families to kind of uh, be above water for one and not be in survival mode, but then also, stimulate the economy. We know this from research that was conducted in on the stimulus payments that have occurred throughout time, that money is then re-injected back into the economy. Whenever you're not in survival mode, you can actually think about like, hey, school's coming up, I can get those new shoes, that new backpack and lunchbox. So it really does end up coming full circle.
Yeah, definitely. You hit a lot of important points of long-term solutions and energy burden. Caleb or Allie, did you have anything you would like to add to that? Love to hear from y'all.
Yeah, I could jump in. So I completely agree with what Heaven said. I would add that we had a year-long planning period. Many of the Solar for All awardees did. Maybe if you were in a state like Connecticut or California or many others who already had robust low-income solar programs, or other sort of similar access programs, those states probably moved forward. But for us, this was like this historic opportunity to plan out what a program could look like. And so I think it's important to note that even though the funds are currently terminated, we made a lot of progress during that time. So from even before the grant officially started, we were figuring out like what does it take to make it possible for people who are low income to actually save money on their solar on their bills through solar and other upgrades. And so part of what we found is maybe not rocket science, but people who are really low income are not going to be able to take advantage of a program like this unless it is a grant type program. So people, maybe 80% to just use sort of a broad threshold at or below 80% of area median income, are likely going to need something that is like, they're not going to need to pay it back. It's a one-time investment and it allows them to have more money in their pocket every month for many, many years after that. But people who are maybe a little bit above that threshold, and it's going to vary a lot based on individual circumstances, but perhaps someone who's more in like the 80 to 120% range, we're able to find that like if folks maybe can combine a smaller grant with something that's a capital that is not like a loan that is not exploitive, like one that has a long term, has very minimal payments, and is like very generous in its interest rate, for example, folks can generally sustain that because it's likely going to be cheaper than what they're paying on their bills. So if we can do that and make homes more comfortable, allow folks to like still have a little bit of extra funding, like that is still something we could still probably move forward. But unfortunately, without Solar for All, like there's just really, it's pretty difficult to conceive of a way in which we can serve the folks who are lowest income. So I say that to say there still are these other relevant solar programs. I'll probably talk more about homes in here, for example, in North Carolina, where we can maybe do some lending that makes that more accessible to folks like sort of in maybe more of that middle category. And if I can just add one other thing, I promise I won't be long-winded the whole time. We saw in North Carolina a lot of folks who had not previously really worked together or even had very good relationships working together towards the end of like making this grant happen. So folks who were community-based organizations, working class people who can benefit from the program, solar contractors. We had just a lot of folks coming together, and funders, like philanthropic funders as well. We had a lot of folks working together on this. And we still have a lot of that momentum. So while a lot of the funding is now missing and we need more, we at least have some of that like softer infrastructure in place where we can build upon to create some form of program that still is serving folks in our sort of target demographic.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful to know a little bit more about the ins and outs. Caleb?
Yeah, thanks. So just a little background about Indian country. 54,000, more than 54,000 tribal households do not have electricity. They experience, the ones that do have electricity experience 6.5% more outages than anybody else. That includes like blackouts and brownouts. The median income for Indian country is $54,000 a year, which is less than the national median income by like $30,000. But I would say that most people who live on reservations their median income is much less than that. I've seen it more like 35 grand a year. So, I mean, we're talking you know, not a lot of electricity. The need for a program like Solar for All, it was huge. Part of the reason why there's less power on reservations is because when the grid was being built, utility companies stopped at reservation borders and didn't connect to the tribal lands because they were like, well, the sovereign nation, they should be able to do it on their own. So, so most houses in Indian country are on the end of the line of these power grids, and so whenever there is an interruption, their power is the first to go, and the power that stays off the longest. So the need is huge, but what Solar for All, the question was, what did it prove was possible we hadn't seen before? It proved that Indian country is ready and able to mobilize at scale to provide resilient energy for their communities. They've got the know-how, they have the motivation, what's important is it was providing more power and having control over their own power is all about building tribal sovereignty. And Allie was talking and Heaven were talking about economic development. It was a keystone for economic development on tribal lands. So a lot of this work has already been happening. So the fact that there was an injection of funds like Solar for All and the rest of the IRA and the BIL funding, they were already moving in the direction of clean energy and building their own grids and establishing their own economic development and energy resilience and tribal sovereignty through power. Um, so when Solar for All got taken away, it was, it's disappointing, um, but it showed that the will is there and the power is there, and they're just going to keep on going. And they can. It was sort of a proof that Indian country can mobilize at scale, which is something that we haven't seen very often because the opportunity hasn't presented itself with that kind of influx of cash. So while disappointing, it was sort of a boost, like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah, thank you all. I think you all mentioned a couple of great key points, which is the program being able to reach some of the most impacted but also most vulnerable populations when we talk about extremely low income or low income communities, as well as the tribal communities that have historically been left out of the transition. And a lot of the work has been happening. It's just that the federal funds helped with that boost. And I think Ali mentioned a key piece, which was being able to provide a full program that wasn't going to be extractive in some way to the folks that are, needing that the most, whether it's in the form of a loan or something else that they have to pay back is super critical when we talk about reaching the most impacted and vulnerable communities. With that, I would love to hear from y'all now, when the federal support was threatened or eliminated, how did your organization or community respond? And we can go in any order.
Well, I'll go ahead and go since I was still talking. So the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, we provide technical assistance to tribes. Particularly, we have a lot of expertise in solar, setting up utilities, wind, and we have access to expertise in all of the clean energy components, run of river, tidal. We're looking at geothermal now, of course. So we have technical assistance, we have tribal engagement, where we engage in a culturally relevant way with the tribes. Each one is different. Find out what their needs are, what they want to do, and then follow their lead and how they want to develop their own energy program. We have, I am in charge of the grants program, so I have a team of grant writers, and we help tribes define the four corners of their project they want to fund and identify grants for it, and then help write the grants and get them submitted. We developed a preferred providers program, which was Solar for All really sort of launched, in that there's a lot of, with as many programs and projects as were coming online and being developed, there's a lot of providers out there that want to do that work. And so what we did is we started sort of culling through the provider list and seeing which ones are most able and best suited to work in Indian country. And then we've developed a Pathways to Trust program to train those providers for how to work in Indian country and give sort of the historical context of tribal relations with the federal government and state governments and everything that's happened through history and how to work and trust with tribes. When the funding first, when the election happened, how about let's say that when we knew that the funding was going to be threatened, we kicked our policy team into high gear, and we go to DC a lot. We created toolkits to help the tribes figure out what next steps could they do, how could they advocate for themselves, giving them tools and resources for doing that. We have been going state by state and working with state legislatures to identify and break down any state legislative barriers to tribes for developing their own energy capacity. We created, there were 6 tribal prime recipients of Solar for All. We were sub-awardees on 2 of them. The alliance itself doesn't take any federal dollars, but we do accept sub-awards from other primes. So we were sub-awardee with Grid Alternatives and with Mterra in the Midwest. And then we worked really closely with Awista Corporation, and also with the Bonneville Energy Foundation and with the Hopi Nation. And then we invited the Tanana Chiefs Corporation in Alaska and Indigenized Energy, all to convene together under what we called Solar for All Tribes, where we wanted to figure out how could we work together and implement this program without stepping on any toes. How could we share resources? How could we really combine our energy to maximize the impact of this program in Indian country? And should the funding be cut, how could we continue to work together to fill in the gaps that the funding was going to leave and make sure that we could make as many of these projects happen anyways? Part of that was establishing the Indigenous Power and Light Fund, which is a $100 million fund that we are raising money for. We have 35 million committed, and we have about 15 million in the bank. So and Awista just launched their fund as well. So between our 2 organizations, we are working to identify the shovel-ready projects that Solar for All was going to fund, and how can we fill in those gaps and still make sure that they're able to take advantage of the tax credits before the cliff happens. So those are some examples of how the Alliance is mobilized. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. I see, Allie, you're off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I think my big picture, sort of as this funding was threatened and eliminated, how the community responded. The big picture is that like this program made sense. This program still makes sense. So it's solar on households is cheap. It is a cheap form of energy. It is going to strengthen the grid because it's helping reduce the overall load, and it's ready to go. So it's like, unlike other energy infrastructure that it requires a good bit of time to be developed, like that's just not the case for these more distributed sources. So because it's sort of quick, cheap, relatively easy, like that made sense. I think it also made sense from a political perspective. This program was very much not just serving like blue states or blue counties and cities. If you look at sort of where the concentrations of the CJUST or climate and economic justice communities are, so like those who are heavily impacted by environmental burdens, and overall just where this funding would have gone based on what we know about the programs, that's hitting a ton of like red congressional districts. Like these are folks who are going to benefit from this program are really across the political spectrum. So I just think that's really important context of like, it doesn't make sense to cancel this program. It's helping a lot of people. It's cheap. Like there's a lot to it. So I think folks, at least in our communities, saw that in a way that is maybe like less apparent with other types of federal programs potentially that may have other narratives around them. So for us, that meant that the sort of folks were really behind us. Support was really strong on many levels. So from like community-based organizations who are really close and working with the folks who would have been beneficiaries. We have an incredible group of nonprofit technical assistance providers doing work to just help us as awardees and sub-awardees figure out our paths forward and to figure out overall programs during the time the Solar for All was available. So like the Clean Energy States Alliance, Lawyers for Good Government, Environmental Protection Network, and many others were providing these really critical services and continued to do so and help us out. And I also think funders are really seeing, like, they saw the potential of this program as well. So I think the reason I can maintain some optimism is that, like, we built all this infrastructure. These folks are all really excited. Things made sense, and like, if something really makes sense, I feel like we can continue to move it forward. And we're all still working together. So it's a question of just like, of course, this is going to happen on a really different scale now. It's not going to be able to work with those who are most impacted. But like, how can we move this forward and build upon what we already have? And that to me is exciting and hopeful, despite sort of the overall termination.
Evan, would love to hear from you real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just add a little bit because I think a lot was already covered. But I'm going to take it even a little broader. Whenever the rollbacks first started, Sun has our hands in kind of a lot of buckets. So we were able to successfully fight some of it, like some of the funds that were specifically earmarked for Puerto Rico. We also had some big losses, obviously Solar for All as of now, and then some community change grants as well. And then we're able to preserve and kind of see through a lot of DOE funds, Department of Energy. But I will say, kind of just underlining what Ali has already said, in the defense campaign that we launched, we did a lot of storytelling as a deployment organization. We have a diverse network of solar owners, and we were able to get elected officials out to see solar in their community. So we also brought solar owners to DC, but I think the most impactful was just around the nation, the incredible work that our team did and tirelessly. I have team members who were working, 12, 13-hour days for multiple months, working to make sure that we were being the voice of the people who supported solar, who either wanted it or have it, especially those that were able to get it through maybe a federal grant, like the Rural Energy for America grant, or REAP through the USDA. We were able to just here in my state in Florida get some, U.S. House representatives to REAP projects in their communities, and even direct pay. We were able to get them to some churches in their community that were able to go solar because of direct pay. So I think that no matter what happens, the amount of storytelling and kind of direct connection that we've been able to do, like Ali said, really will linger, that understanding that solar is for everyone. And I dropped this in the chat, but there was a really great article that came out today about the Georgia Solar for All program in the New York Times, and just reiterates that as well.
Yeah, thank you all for that. I heard a couple of really awesome points there. And, given all of that, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about adaptation and innovation. So I'm going to combine two things here. What kind of alternative funding or support mechanisms have you all deployed or seen working quickly on the ground? And what creative solutions have emerged that you haven't seen before or expected in this, landscape of things? And we could go with whoever wants to start first.
I will start because I was just talking. I think that we've had to pivot really quickly because we already have like a deployment basis for our work, but we really drilled down our program design for LIDAC communities, and we're ready to launch. So the momentum was already there. So we have been working really around the nation on some innovative ways to solarize in LIDAC communities. And one of them that is really emerging as an amazing kind of source of funding is using SRECs, or solar renewable energy credits, and working specifically with aggregators that kind of aggregate impact SRECs or equity-based SRECs. So that's something that we've been doing in our Florida program. We had a pot of funding that was for, I think, around 40 homes that we could do, and we were able to stretch that to over 70 by using SRECs and really developing an SREC program at Sun. So that's just one kind of creative solution we found. But I think that there is a huge need for funding because this the level of impact that's ready to be unleashed can't be unleashed without philanthropic commitments. So
Yeah, and I think we are seeing some of those philanthropic pooled funds, and philanthropy I think is trying to figure out what they can do. They can't fulfill the role of the federal government. They can't fulfill the role of state government. It's just not the same scale. But there are ways to create some of these pooled funds that we'll be able to take advantage of. I think we don't currently know exactly what that's going to look like, or how big those might be, or what types of technologies they may fund. But I'm appreciative of different philanthropies really taking the lead and trying to figure out what is our role and how do we move this stuff forward. It's just too much to lose. The other thing that I would say in terms of just creative solutions, a lot of our CBOs in the state, we're providing different types of community-based organizations. We're providing different types of navigation services for families that were seeking to take advantage of all the different Inflation Reduction Act programs. The main sort of site that we have in North and South Carolina is Energy Funds for All, and this is managed by a couple of advocate organizations, particularly the League of Conservation Voters here. They're just a remarkable group. Like, I think they're doing this on kind of a shoestring budget, and they are able to keep current information about what folks have access to, and you can sort of enter from like, I'm a renter, or I'm a homeowner, or like I'm trying to reduce my energy bills, or I want an HVAC. So you can kind of get at it in different ways. But what I think is innovative or creative about this is that one of the individuals who leads this program, she does a lot of direct work just directly with households. So like a lot of folks just are not quickly able to figure out these federal and state applications like they are. I think like most of us are going to fall in that category. It's just like they're not intuitive. You have to make 5 different logins. You just like, there's a lot of layers. And then if you're someone who doesn't have internet at home, or like spotty access in general, or don't have a computer, you're doing it from your mobile phone, like all of those are just additional barriers for folks we're trying to work with. So this individual, as well as a couple of other community-based organizations, have these types of navigator programs where they're like literally just sitting down with people one by one. Or another example is the Center for Energy Education in the northeastern part of our state, which is a very rural area. Folks just come to their site and are like, we want the homes in here rebate. How do we make this happen? And they just sit down and work on that. And on one hand, you might think like, oh, that's not particularly innovative. It's just like chatting with your neighbors. But like, that's pretty innovative, I think, right now. And it's not like, we do need folks that is usually something that gets left out of these budgets. They do a lot of planning. We do a lot of like, we're going to fund the distributed energy plus like wonky words. And then the like, ooh, how do people get signed up for this program gets really left behind. So I think those organizations are really making that happen in our state, and they're helping navigate all of just the confusion that exists now, just given the overarching context.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Homes in Here program. It's nice to see that program is still moving. We're helping the state of Wisconsin implement their program in Indian country in that state, and also California is really moving on that as well. Yeah, I mean, thinking about energy efficiency seems to be a creative solution, even though it's like, well, of course, it should be the basis of good use of energy. But yeah, it's sort of forcing the issue, which is not a bad thing. As far as uh, deployment and of programs and things. I mentioned the funds that we're starting, and we're also seeing a lot of movement in philanthropy and impact investors being really interested in funding actionable projects. We've been making the rounds in those circles quite a bit. We just had a meeting with the um, Native Americans in Philanthropy organization, as well as Climate Week in New York. Lots of impact investors there looking for projects that they can invest in and that would make a swift, good impact. And in Indian country, that's all of them. All of them will do that. So it is exciting to see the mobilization of those philanthropic communities. We're also seeing a lot more increased coordination between support organizations, which is also a really great thing to see. The Solar for All Tribes effort that we started is morphing into, what can we do now without the federal money after all? It's making us put our money where our mouth is as the 6, tribal primes, and bringing in other utilities and other organizations across the country, and working more regionally. My team in particular, the grant writing team, we're shifting our focus from federal, tracking federal opportunities to state by state. And we're doing an email campaign right now to all the tribes in each state, identifying what state and corporate and philanthropic opportunities exist right there. And they're still around. There's, they're not as much, but they're still around. And so it's Allie's optimism is great, because that's what we need to communicate. It's very easy. Like we just were talking with a native village up in the Aleutian chain in Alaska. They were trying to pull together a state application, and it was really hard, and they didn't have all the information yet. So missed the deadline, but we're helping them try to pull all that information together for the next round and whatever opportunities come next. And then the CDFI news came out that the RIF yesterday, the reduction in force announcement, which is gonna, it's gonna hit the native CDFI community tremendously. It's gonna be terrible. And so we mobilized a toolkit for, how tribes can advocate for them, for that, and really get involved. But this community in the Aleutian chain, they were like, well, we're not going to get any funding, I guess, until this administration's gone. And that's what we're trying to fight against, is sort of the throwing up of the hands. We've got a great community. There's a lot of funding still out there. We can work together. It's not all doom and gloom. We can do it.
Yeah, thank you all. I think I heard a couple of really, powerful things there, which was the coordination services, the networks of folks that are already on the ground, or support organizations that are doing the amazing work. And that also came up in the policy brief with the grantees, is just having those coordination services. And as Ali mentioned, a lot of times there's not funding for that, is so critical in these moments, or in general for this funding. Even as folks in the industry, navigating those state applications is not easy. So appreciate that. And then I have 2 more questions for you all, and I just want to encourage folks, please make sure to enter your questions into the Q&A feature. We will get to them in about 5 minutes or so. So with that, I want to ask you all, what do you all think is the most important thing that people should understand about energy justice work right now?
I can chime in. Yeah, I think so. We're joking about like my optimism. I was voted most optimistic in high school, which what kind of superlative is that? I don't know. I was quite pessimistic actually about receiving that, because I thought it was very odd. But I will say it's not blind optimism. I think like I am someone who I think I couldn't not work in this space, even though I think from the outside it generally looks really depressing to be working on climate and energy. And it's like we are fighting a lot, and that is not to be discounted. But the reason I couldn't not work in this space is because like I see how many people when I'm in it, I see how many people are doing just incredible work despite the circumstances and like moving things forward. And that's where like any level of hope or optimism that I have comes from, is just seeing that like there is a lot that's possible. This is a huge loss with this funding, but also we can do things, we can do hard things, and we can move the work forward. So I think it's important to just not lose sight of that. I think particularly just with the deluge of information and bad news, kind of on a lot of different fronts right now. I also think it's important to be careful about the type of language that we're using generally. I think language obviously right now is very sort of hotly politicized. We know there's certain words that have been sort of banned or effectively banned from federal grants, and things that you maybe can't say or feel like you can't say. I think at the end of the day, the work remains the same. So I am generally not talking always about energy in maybe terms in which I think about it. Like I may think about justice, and the reasons I am motivated for this work is to be able to level the playing field, because I think that you should have I think you should have reasonable bills, and you should be able to like pay your bill, that you like keep your lights on, be comfortable and safe in your home. And I think you should be able to like afford eggs at the grocery store. So for me, that is like justice, and that's how I would think about it. But a lot of people are just not going to resonate with that language. And also, like, what do we mean? So I think it's important to say, when we are talking about energy and energy justice, to like clarify what we mean a little bit. I think both to make it more palatable for people who might not think exactly the same as us, but also just because I think we have historically, I feel like folks on the more progressive side, or folks who might be advocating for energy justice, I think there's a tendency to rely on your words to like convey this overarching meaning without actually saying what you're trying to say, which is like we're just trying to level the playing field. So I would just challenge us each to be careful about like, yeah, what are our own motivations, and then how can I articulate that to someone who might have similar motivations but are just like not going to come at it with the same words that I might use.
Caleb and Heaven, anything?
Yeah, I can add in. So to your question about just working in energy justice right now, I think that I would share, especially with any kind of people looking to move into this work, or just getting into the workforce, that it's so holistic, that this touches everything and everyone. Um, that is something that I don't think I fully understood when coming into energy. I thought I was kind of, formerly being a social worker, I thought I was kind of narrowing my scope, when really it was just getting bigger and bigger. So I think it's something that keeps it exciting, but also makes the work so meaningful, and kind of gives you that passion to keep going and keep pushing, even under duress or with strong headwinds, because it really affects everything, from ag producers being able to keep their farm and keep producing our nation's food, to even people who are all like literally working for the opposite type of energy that we hope to proliferate, coal miners, who can't afford their own energy bill, in West Virginia, which is one of the most heavily energy burdened states. So I think that it's just so big and touches everything, and it's kind of an honor to be a part of this work.
I think within the context of Indian country, the rollbacks and everything that happened was just proof that, again, tribes cannot depend on the federal government to do what it says. More promises broken is what it is. And so it's the blessing in disguise here could be more motivation to really develop their own sovereignty, and opportunities too. We're not starting from ground zero here. in the solar industry. You know, we got knocked back to maybe 2019, but we're not starting from ground zero. Technology is a lot better. Regulations generally in the States are better and becoming better. And tribes have continued to be as resilient and strong as ever. And so this is really an opportunity to develop energy sovereignty for real, and to work together to do it. And that's where the alliance really is coming into play and working. And there's no better time to plan. All right, so we don't have projects, but we can certainly keep planning and coming up with energy plans, putting all the pieces into place and starting to put together the resources needed to pull it off. And there's lots of new resources out there that organizations like on this call are putting together to make it happen. So the work is as important as ever. And the motivation is there. And for tribes, it's a good opportunity to continue to build their own sovereignty.
Thank you all for that. I just want to remind folks that when you enter questions into the Q&A, they are anonymous, so please get your questions in. I heard some really awesome things in this last round of responses that you all mentioned, things like being able to relate with folks on affordability and reliability as one of the main tenets of why we should continue this work and why this work is so important, and a lot of great work happening on the ground, so there are support and resources there. Just to switch gears a little bit, this is going to be a quick rapid fire. I would love to hear from you all in 30 seconds or less. What keeps you going in this work? What gives you hope or inspires you in this work?
Well, what's inspiring to me is working with so many different tribal communities, and seeing the strength and resilience and doing everything that I can to help correct the wrongs from the past, and to help Indian country build its own future.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that. It's the people. That's really what gives you hope and keeps you going, is being able to see the kind of fruit of your labors.
Yeah, agreed. Both the people I'm working with, and then the people that sort of could be benefiting from programs like this. And I think just thinking about the reality that could be if we can sort of make progress in this. As Heaven was saying, this is like it touches so many different aspects of people's lives, and I think that is really exciting because we can take sort of smaller steps and they can have pretty big impact.
Well, thank you all. That closes the panel discussion section for our call. I'm going to move into some of the questions that came through. One of the main questions that came through is, what do you need from other sectors or organizations to be successful? And you can go with any order if whoever feels like they resonate with that question.
I will just give a huge shout out to the legal sector for stepping it up. There's been a lot of pro bono services provided, so extremely grateful that that has happened. And then just to kind of reiterate an earlier comment about needing philanthropy to try and fill the gap as much as possible. So much work was done, so much has been designed and is ready to deploy. So making sure it wasn't all for naught.
Yeah. I think if you got money, we need money, and we have the ability to deploy it. If you don't got money to offer, it would be really helpful to see the different types of projects and different things that you're seeing from your vantage point. So I think routinely we'll hear from folks of like, yeah, we have this really neat thing going on in my community that I actually feel like could be a big deal if we can get it funded. And so if we're able to, we maybe don't see that automatically. So I think hearing, to the extent you have something in our respective jurisdictions, hearing about those types of projects and other local innovation that's happening, we may not have an immediate capital to move it forward, but like if we can play that role in connecting, it doesn't even have to go through us, but just like you may have this neat project, we might know a funder who could move it forward, and we would be glad to like try and make those types of connections, to just be able to all be kind of moving it forward.
Yeah, and we need more providers who would be dedicated to Indian country and learning about how to work in Indian country, for one, and then more partners for procurement and supply chain support and design work and a lot of the nitty gritty, hard work that goes into planning these projects. We need utilities to be more friendly to Indian country, please. You know, let's have them work with tribes better. That would be huge, huge.
The next question that we have here is building on the interventions, at what levels of governance do you think you can have the most significant impacts on energy justice outcomes?
I would say local. I think that local AHJs, so like building and permitting offices, have a lot of untapped power, and can really skyrocket soft costs, especially in hyper vulnerable areas like Florida. So some of our most heavily burdened, energy burdened areas also have some of the strictest permitting, that and most expensive.
Yeah, I think in that realm, just building off of what Heaven said, there tend to be a lot of information gaps at that local level as well. So meaning you might have a county commission, for example, who is supposed to be doing the permitting for a project, for like community solar project, for example, but doesn't know a ton about it and doesn't know a ton about like one, maybe the basics about how community solar can work or should work, and then sort of the next level of like, how does this connect to the grid and what mechanisms need to be in place? And all of that is just, so those commissioners are then having to make decisions, and they're just not in a very good, not in a very good situation to do that. And so I think what that ultimately often means is like, you're going to default to what you know, and you're not going to move forward with something like a community solar project that could be really beneficial to the local community and in advancing energy justice outcomes. But it's, I think, largely due to just general political perception about what solar might be, coupled with not actually knowing a ton about the specifics. So I think that a possible intervention is at least making the information more accessible to the local folks who are in those decision-making places. And it doesn't mean that like things are going to just move forward flawlessly. Of course, there are still major things to work through, but at least so that folks have more information to be able to make those decisions at the local level.
Caleb, quick, we're on the last minute. If you had anything
We need state and federal government people to take trust and treaty responsibilities more seriously in Indian country. And that especially, and everyone involved in the solar industry, to be real serious about tribal consultation and to consult with the tribes and listen to what they say and do what they say when considering lands and projects that impact not only tribal lands, but also sacred sites that are maybe off-res.
Thank you all for that. That is it for the questions that we can get to for today. But before we close, I would love to hear from y'all. Drop one word in the chat. What are you leaving with? What's resonating with you? And I really appreciate everyone bringing their full selves to their conversation today. And thank you all for joining this vital conversation. As we part, I would love to leave you with these parting words by Arundhati Roy, a South Asian writer and activist. And she says, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." So thank you all. Let's continue to building that world together. And I look forward to staying engaged.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.